Now, even though I'm very open about the fact that I'm an extrovert when I create podcasts and content, you might be surprised by today's episode. It might feel a little out of the box because as an out-and-out extrovert who's very open about their extroversion, most of my content that I create, I always ensure that I'm speaking to or making consideration of, well, what if someone is introverted? What if someone is different to me? But in today's episode of the Heart Centered Business Podcast, I'm going to talk about online marketing for extroverts, because I don't think people really understand how impactful it can be to be isolated and feel lonely and not have access to other people as an online business owner when the very thing you need to charge your batteries is connection and contact with other people. So that's what we're talking about in today's episode, online marketing for extroverts. You can find the show notes over at tashcorbin.com/504 because this is episode number 504. Let's dive in. Hello, I'm Tash Corbin, a business strategist and mentor based on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. The mission of this podcast is to help heart-centered entrepreneurs to make more money and in doing so, change the world for the better. This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi and Jinnaburra people. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. So as I said in the intro, I often create content that reassures the introverts who listen to my content. Now, rightly so, I mostly get butt tashes, #butt tashes, from introverted listeners or introverted participants in my audience saying, but Tash, you're an extrovert. So what about me? I'm an introvert. And rightly so, right? I am very open about being extroverted, and therefore it can be easy to assume that the strategies I'm teaching, the experiences I'm sharing are mostly extrovert friendly. And so most of the content I create, I'm mindful to ensure that I am reassuring introverts, talking about what the introverted version is, talking about how we can create space in your business to be able to give you that solo time to recharge your batteries and all of those sorts of things. And I will link in the show notes of today's episode to some of my introvert-specific episodes of the podcast as well. But when I look at the online business space and a lot of the creators that I follow, I would say that being an extrovert is the exception and being an introvert is more common, especially for women online business owners. In Australia, we have Denise Duffield-Thomas, Leonie Dawson, Tina Tower, Emily Osmond, all the people who've been on this podcast, Julie Parker. They're all open about being introverted. In the American market, Rachel Rodgers, Marie Forleo, Amy Porterfield. I'm actually struggling to think of a woman online business owner who is prolific and is an extrovert. And so it's actually, I think, the opposite of what we assume. A lot of times when I talk about, oh, Denise is actually an introvert, people are surprised by that because she's such a prolific content creator. But if you really think about it at the heart of it, number one, the internet was built by introverts for introverts. Literally, like, how can we interconnect with each other without leaving our homes? But also, what we are seeing is content. It's not necessarily that we're engaging with that person live. They're not actually spending a lot of time with a lot of people. So the internet being built the way that it is, and if we go by the definition of introversion and extroversion, like it is in Myers-Briggs type indicators, that you're energized by being around people versus energized by being alone, then I would say that a lot of extroverts can accidentally build an introvert-friendly business because they're role modeling from introverts without realizing they're role modeling from introverts. And also the way that online business is built, You don't realize how lonely it can be until you're sitting at your desk 3 weeks into starting an online business and you start having conversations with your owl-shaped pen holder. Not that that's an experience that I've ever had. I just heard a story about that, right? So as an extrovert myself, I really struggled with the quiet of starting an online business. I really struggle with the quiet of being home on my own and trying to make friends on the internet, because I'd never had to make friends on the internet before. I'd never used Facebook in the way that some of my introverted friends had, where they made friends through their interests on Facebook with strangers from all across the world. The only friends I had on Facebook were people that I was friends with in real life. Because as an extrovert, I was out socializing and meeting people and then wanting to stay in touch and organize more opportunities to hang out with people. I used Facebook in that way. And so it's really fascinating to hear sometimes the assumptions about someone being introverted versus extroverted, but also it's fascinating to see how sometimes extroverts have accidentally built an introvert-friendly business, either by design because they're copying a model of an introvert, or simply by default because they think that that's what you do to start an online business. So here are my top 4 tips for extroverts when it comes to online marketing. Number 1, if you are energized by other people, do not limit your ability to interact with other people to one source in your business. For example, paying clients. I definitely see this as a prolific piece of advice that your non-paying audience don't get to interact with you. Your paying audience are the only ones who get to interact with you. People have to pay for the privilege of your time, your attention, and your energy. Well, if I was to do that in my business, I wouldn't have any paying clients because I would be completely empty battery-wise. So when it comes to creating your marketing strategies, look for ways that you can include things that charge you up, i.e. connection with other people, and incorporate that as part of the free pieces of your marketing and sales strategy rather than only withholding that for your paying clients. So when it comes to having a mastermind or being in a mastermind, that's a brilliant thing for you to do early compared to potentially introverts who'd rather do self-study so that you can get that connection with peers. It could also be that you go to far more events in the early stages of your business because that's a battery charge and that's your superpower. Also, when it comes to marketing, looking for very connected strategies like running live webinars, doing things where you might jump on a Zoom call with a potential client far earlier than would normally be the process. So I know for myself, when I was first starting my business, I just naturally did this. And to be honest, a couple of business coaches told me I was doing the wrong thing, but I just did it because I liked it. And that was, if I saw someone who was in a Facebook group who was struggling with something, rather than like having 3 and 4 messages back and forth, seeing if they would be willing to pay me for help, I would just say, why don't we just jump on a quick Zoom? I'll see if I can help you through it. And at the time it was actually Skype. And so I was having Skype conversations with 3 and 4 people a day when I first started my business. And some coaches commented that I was literally like giving people business coaching for free. But honestly, it was charging my batteries. And the more I just embraced it and the more I did it, the more excited I was to get online every morning and the more clients I was getting, because seeing me talk, like witnessing me and working with me one-on-one was one of the most magical, powerful ways that people would get excited about hiring me as a business coach. So why would I hide that part of myself away behind a paywall when it was the very thing that resulted in my first $2,500 sales of my VIP packages. Was helping someone fix a MailChimp issue for free. Was helping someone who was struggling with how to structure their blogs by jumping on a Skype call for free and saying, well, why don't we talk it out? And in talking it out and understanding their business, and I was giving them some really good advice, they literally stopped me mid-sentence and said, hey, hold up. You're a business coach, right? How do I pay you? How do we do this? Because this is the exact kind of mentorship I need. I was like, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get this sorted first and then we can talk about that next. And $2,500 sale. So, a lot of those strategies are kind of pushed away. They're not recommended. A lot of mentors and marketers are introverts, and so they couldn't wait to stop that part of their marketing strategy. And a few years down the track, they forget they ever did it as well. There are so many people that I know when they first started their business, they were running live events for free. They were going out and letterbox dropping businesses, local businesses, and having conversations with local business owners. They were doing tons and tons of free calls. They were doing free webinars every single week. They were doing free one-on-one discovery calls consistently, right? They don't have to do that now anymore, but they often discourage others from doing that in the early stages of their business, saying, well, there's an easier way, just run Facebook ads. There's an easier way, just set up a sales page. There's an easier way, just XYZ. But what I think a lot of people don't realize or recognize is that the reason their sales pages became so effective was because they had so many one-on-one conversations. It's the reason that they were able to get so many people signing up to their free webinars was because they ran these things as free in-person events. And to get people putting on a bra and stepping out of the house and coming to your event, you really need to nail your messaging. And so a lot of the magic and a lot of the effectiveness of their more introvert-friendly strategies came from them getting out of the house a little bit more, talking to a few more people one-on-one. So it's sometimes actively discouraged by marketing mentors, but I don't think that they often interrogate not only one, that the reason why they discourage it is because they're an introvert and they would hate to keep having to do that. But also, number two, they don't recognize how much value that brought into their business and how valuable it was in terms of shaping their niching decisions, their messaging decisions, and how they crafted their offers as well. So as much as possible, give yourself multiple sources of interaction with other humans, whether that be, as I said, masterminding, going to events, in your marketing strategies, working with as many clients as possible as well. Like so many people want to dive into passive income as quickly as possible. But for a lot of my extroverted clients, they try and undo that dive into passive income because now they spend 80% of their day working on their own, working on funnel tightening and metrics and content redistribution and repurposing, and they miss the human-to-human element. They miss actually being of service. They miss having conversations with actual clients. And so don't limit yourself thinking that giving people your time and energy and attention is this like very secret, very magical thing that only special people who pay you thousands and thousands of dollars ever get access to, because that can be very limiting for your business growth and it can be very draining on your energy. Additionally, like following and interacting with mentors that you can have an actual conversation with rather than just learning from them in their pre-recorded videos can then be far more engaging and powering up for you as an extrovert. And also don't forget non-business time. So I really pride myself on this as well, that even in the first 2 years of starting my business, I prioritized getting out of the house and keeping up friendships, keeping up connections with people, keeping up those opportunities to be surrounded by other humans. And even if it was doing some blog post writing at a cafe surrounded by other humans that I didn't interact with as much, I knew that it was really good for my energy, and it really helped me to feel that sense of alignment and cure my need to talk to my owl-shaped pencil holder, because yes, that was me. Secondly, my number 2 tip is to separate advanced from automated. In our brains, we can see anything that might be advanced in business as it must be automated, but it can be advanced without being automated. And if you separate those two things out as an extrovert, chances are you'll find your business far more energizing and far more sustainable. The places where I've kept it connected rather than automated it are a mindful choice for me, based on my skill set, based on my extroversion, based on my zone of genius, and also based on my ability to be able to get to know lots and lots of different people. So in follow-ups, my follow-ups are not automated. I did a session with someone recently and I got an email from them like 2 hours after the session, and it was like, it was so great. Make sure you send me a video of XYZ. It was great to hear. It was great to work with you today. And then we hadn't talked about me sending a video to the person. So, of course, I replied and went, hey, do I need to send you a video? What am I sending you a video of? And they were like, oh, no, that's just the automation in my Acuity or Calendly or whatever system they were using. And I was like, oh, that's fine, no worries. But then I was thinking like, oh, should I have an automated email after client sessions where it sends them through that email to say, it was great, don't forget to book your next session, or if you have any follow-up or feedback, please let me know. But then I was like, but I do that manually, and I do that in a very considered way. And actually, for a lot of people, it might be a distraction if they think it's a personalized email from me. And what is it actually achieving? And can I achieve that in a way that is more aligned and within the time and energy that I have for my business? And so, it's definitely been an interesting journey over the last few years, because I haven't just been an extrovert. I've been an extrovert with very limited energy. I've been an extrovert who could barely spend 5 hours a week at my desk, especially in the end of 2021 and the first half of 2022. And so I have to use my time and energy very sparingly. But guess what I didn't stop doing manually? Follow-ups. Interesting, right? I still saw that as a very powerful use of my time, and I still understood that the deep level of knowing the other person, being very personalized in the questions that I ask or the advice that I give, is so much my zone of genius, my superpower, and has such an impact on the conversion rates and effectiveness that I wouldn't look to automate that. And I still, to this day, do not automate lead management, follow-ups, interacting with people in DMs, emails, any of those sorts of things. I have team members who help out with that, but they disclose when it's the team member who's talking to people. And I would still say 90% of those interactions, especially in the leads and follow-up, are me. And I would say my business is very advanced and it's not automated in those places. I automate in places where there isn't a lot of human interaction required. I automate in those places where it is draining to my energy. And so being mindful of your unique personality, what it is that fires and lights you up, what energizes you, can mean that the decisions you make in your business strategy, in your model, in your systems and automations can be very different to others in the industry. And I want you to ensure that you're not conflating these two ideas of automation means advanced, because that is not the case. Oh, I just thought of another example. Automated webinars. Oh my gosh, they were so prolific in 2017, 2018, 2019, where you'd sign up for a webinar. There'd be 3 times for you to choose from. One just so happened to be starting 15 minutes from now. Oh my gosh. And it was a pretend live webinar. And they were so prolific. And even to the point where there was like a fake chat channel, but the person, the video itself, the slide deck, the presentation, everything, that was all pre-recorded. There was no one actually there live. And that was considered to be the most advanced strategy, right? For launching, for sales, for lead generation. And yet, I was in a mastermind in 2018, 2019, where like there were 11 of us. I think 9 out of 11 of us was doing automated webinars as a strategy. And I made more sales in my 2 live webinars each quarter than these people were making with thousands and thousands and thousands of people going through an automated webinar. So just because the webinar is automated doesn't mean it's more effective, and it certainly doesn't mean it's more advanced in its effectiveness or even in the strategy of it. My strategy of doing my launches and running 2 webinars as part of my launches, there was more depth involved in the way that I structured it. I had to be far more considered in my email construction as well. And I had to be able to deliver that webinar live, answer questions live, manage the chat live. Whereas like recording a video and chucking it into an automated tool, it might be more techie. It might be more technologically advanced, but from a marketing strategy or a capacity as a marketer and your abilities as a marketer, it doesn't necessarily mean it's more advanced. So number 2 is separate out the definition of advanced from the definition of automated. Just because it's automated doesn't mean it's more advanced. Now, number 3 is you do need to ensure you have spoken and energetic boundaries. Shared, written, and energetic boundaries. So the phrase that I like to use, the term I like to use, I have no idea where it came from, someone will remember, is open, soft heart, big, solid fence. I think there was a swear word in it when I first heard it, but it made so much sense to me. I keep my heart and my energy so open and soft. I'm so open to meeting hundreds and hundreds of people a day if I can. I love being in the energy of other people, but I have a big solid fence when it comes to my boundaries. And by doing that, the people who end up being in my orbit, who I end up having those deep connections with, respect those boundaries. They understand those boundaries, and energetically, I'm not just opening myself up to all the energy suckers. I'm not opening myself up to somehow becoming someone's business coach absolutely free for an extended period of time. I'm not opening myself up to being an on-call business coach in DMs with people. So a lot of that I've learned through having the boundaries crossed or through feeling like I am overstretching myself, but I'd rather have done it that way than shut down all of that connection completely through preventative measures. I don't regret any of the times where I've got myself into a tricky situation, because learning how to navigate that situation and diagnosing where it came from and what boundary I might need to establish is exactly the lesson I needed to learn and wanted to learn. And it's a small price to pay to have that lesson, but also it's a very small price to pay to keep that open, soft heart. And I love that my business is built through that lens. I remember in 2015, I was getting a lot of people asking me business coaching questions through my contact form on my website, because I directed a lot of people to my website. My podcast and blogs were on my website. So if people had a follow-up question for it, they would go and ask that question in my contact form. And I remember talking about it with a few business friends and saying, oh, like there's just so many people asking me for advice in the contact form. And I feel like I'm constantly having to say, well, look, I don't normally give this advice out for free, but here's the answer. And asking some qualifying questions, or, I did do a lot of lead generation with those forms being submitted. And maybe 10% of people who asked a question in the form ended up becoming a client in some way. And the other 90% didn't necessarily become a client. But I would say there was also another 10 to 20% of people who never became a client, but they were submitting multiple questions to me on that contact form. And when I replied, they would ask more questions. And so I did feel like I was being almost like a surrogate free business coach for people over email. And so I was talking about it with some business friends, and they're like, it's time to get rid of the contact form on your website. You're too popular. Your business is too big. You can't have a contact form on your website because it's just going to open you up to far too much people crossing your boundaries. And I really sat with this for quite a while. And I was contemplating taking it away, but I just got so much like connection with people out of it. I learned so much about my audience through it. And I didn't actually want people to stop submitting their forms. I just wanted to stop the expectation that I would coach them for free. And so I came up with, at the time, what was a revolutionary thing, which was I just put a sentence at the top of my contact form that said, free business coaching via email is not a thing. But if you have a question about one of my products or a question about something I've covered on the podcast, pop it in here. And that simple little boundary, as well as the energetic work I did around keeping myself open, keeping my heart open, staying open to the connection, whilst having that lovely big solid fence around my boundaries, made a world of difference, right? Between those two things of the energetic work and then putting that little statement in there that was quite boundaried. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant change. The number of forms coming through did not slow down, but the type of questions that people were asking pivoted a little. And often people would start by, hey, I'm looking at your takeoff program, but I've got this question about the social media strategy you talked about in episode number XYZ. And so people were more openly telling me that they were considering a product or service, so they were self-identifying as leads more readily, and they were asking questions in a far more respectful way. And it made a huge difference, right? But I think people are very quick to shut down the channel instead of establishing the boundary. And establishing the boundary can feel tricky, and it can feel hard, and it can feel uncomfortable, but having no leads come into your business also feels tricky and also feels hard and also feels uncomfortable. And so, it's one of those choose your discomfort moments. And I'm so glad that I was mindful about keeping connection big in my business. And the more I learn about myself, the more I learn about the way that I do business, the more I learn about what lights me up, the more driven I am to keep that connection up, to keep it going, to keep facilitating and fostering it. And the better I get at being clear on my boundaries and on reinforcing those boundaries in a really kind and loving way. And I'm really grateful to past Tash for prioritizing connection and for listening to her intuition and instincts around not wanting to close off to that human-to-human connection. I mean, I didn't listen to myself all the time. There were times where I've completely shut it down and then went, oh, I don't really like that, and had to undo a lot of stuff. But I do like the real tangibility of that example with the contact form. And that was one time where I really did listen to myself and take some time to consider it before taking advice from others. That one just popped into my brain and I thought I would share it. What a good one. And then tip number 4, which is probably related to tip number 3, is that not all energy is good energy to be in, right? Even though it lights up your extroverted self, we still need to be mindful of the spaces and groups that we step into and whether it's overall beneficial to us. So I can definitely see that I joined online programs and masterminds because I just wanted to be in the room with other people, but I wasn't as conscious of being mindful about who those other people were. And I also think I stayed in business networks and business relationships and friendships because I just needed as much human-to-human connection as possible. And those friendships or those networks weren't necessarily a positive experience or didn't necessarily have a positive impact on me energy-wise overall, or in terms of my mindset as well as my energy. So a couple of examples of that were client relationships that I held on to maybe a little longer than I should have because I just like humans and I want to be connected to humans. And, you know, it feels sad sometimes to exit that depth of working relationship with someone. Similarly with mentors, I probably could have cancelled far earlier with a bunch of mentors that I worked with. Even team members that I wasn't necessarily getting great value out of the work that they were doing in the business, but the fact that I got to meet with them every week was really good for me from just having someone to talk to about my business. But I could have sourced a lot of those experiences in slightly different ways. And so being discerning about the types of groups that I tap into, the types of spaces that I step into, has really been something I've learned along the way. And I've probably had to relearn some tough lessons over and over and over again, even to the extent where I had some clients who were on like payment plans, recurring payment plans to be part of programs, to work with me one-on-one, and their payments had been failing for months, but I still showed up and did their sessions. I still allowed them to participate in the group because of my extroversion and my desire to care and look after people, and also probably some naivety around people's intentions as well. I can tend to fall into being a bit of a doormat when it comes to working relationships, when it comes to relationships overall, friendships, all of those sorts of things. And so I've had to learn some pretty tough lessons the hard way. Another tangible example of that was a friend that I had before I started my business. When I started my business, they were very excited and very interested. They were on maternity leave from their job, and they were constantly asking me questions just in messenger chats and things like that as friends about my business and what I was doing. And they'd asked me, you know, well, do you think I could start a business? Maybe I could do a business doing this. Maybe I could do a business doing that. And I'm always someone who like wants to encourage as many people as possible to have their own businesses and get out of having to climb the corporate ladder or get out of some of those patriarchal workplaces and structures. And it was probably 6 months into those chats where she asked me, could she join the Takeoff program to just dabble? And she was like, I'm just on mat leave. I don't have any money to be able to spend on this, but I would love to like learn a bit about what you do, and maybe you could just add me into your program, and I won't come to the calls or anything. I just want to have a look at the modules and see if it's something that I feel brave enough to do. And then it was getting to the point where 3 or 4 nights a week, I would get a message on Skype asking me questions that would normally be asked in the Takeoff calls from someone who hadn't paid for the program. And I would answer those questions, and I really struggle with like, how do I redraw this boundary? I didn't establish that boundary at the start. I let this person into my program for free. I've been coaching this person over Messenger for free for far too long. Like, what am I going to do about this? And I ended up sending her a message and saying, look, it sounds to me like you're really starting to get some traction. I'd seen she'd got a couple of clients from the Heart Centre group. I said, if you'd like to stick in the Takeoff program, I'll need you to pay for your enrollment. So this time next week, we'll pop you out if you still don't have the funds for it, but I just wanted to let you know. And the following week, she sent me a message to say, hey, you can remove me from your program now. I've joined another one. And she had paid $5,500 to join someone else's mentoring program to start her business. And I was gobsmacked. I was floored. Like at the time, I think the takeoff program was $1,200. And it was such a tough lesson. There were tears, there was frustration, there was anger. I felt betrayed. I felt so lost. I was like, I have helped this person for free all this time, and they didn't see investing in my program as worthwhile. And then for the following 4 weeks, this person kept asking me questions on Messenger, and I kept answering them. She got both, right? Like, why would she pay for the takeoff program when she got access to me for free on Messenger? And so it took me 4 weeks to even notice what was happening. She was in someone else's program, but she was asking me for personalized support and advice. And so then when I set that boundary, I said, hey, look, I really love that you see me as someone who can help you, and I'm really excited that you're starting your business, but I can no longer continue to coach you for free on Messenger. And knowing that you've joined that other program, you should be making sure that you're getting advice from them, because I might be giving you conflicting advice. So I'm just going to ask you from here to respect that boundary. And I never heard from that person again. She blocked me. And we had been friends since we were teenagers. And so, like, absolutely wild lessons to learn. Absolutely. And like, I even showed those messages to so many people going, have I said something wrong? Did I do something too harsh here? Because I feel like I was so gentle and I was so nice about it. But sometimes when you establish a relationship with someone, being a doormat, when you stop being a doormat, they don't want to be your friend anymore. And so, you know, there's a lot to be learned. But again, I don't regret any of it. I do not regret. Maybe I would have established the boundary a little sooner rather than letting it drag on like that. Maybe I wouldn't have let them into the takeoff program for free. But letting one person into the takeoff program for free, I've never done it again. Never, ever, ever, ever have I let another person into the takeoff program for free. And so, good, powerful lesson to learn. Glad I haven't continued to do that, right? And so I don't regret those mistakes. I don't regret those lessons. I don't regret those boundary crosses. I don't regret learning the lesson the hard way, because now, even to this day, I'm still quite naive, and it does frustrate Davey a little. Everyone says I'm too generous, I'm too giving, I'm too nurturing, but I'm operating my business in a way that works for me. And it might be too giving for other people. It might be too generous for other people. It might look like I'm wasting a lot of time and energy on audiences who haven't paid me money when I run so many webinars, when I do this podcast so prolifically, and I'm giving free business advice so consistently in this podcast. But I'm getting paid handsomely, and I'm very happy with the income I generate from my business. Yes, I'd love to grow it. But at the same time, if I had to choose between $1 million in my business this year, and the only way I can get it is through everything being automated and not talking to other humans, or having a $500,000 business this year and still being able to be generous and kind and connected, I'd choose the $500,000. I absolutely would. Now, lucky for me, I don't have to choose, because I know I can scale my business, and I am on track to scale my business and still have that connection and make the million. And that is such a beautiful thing to feel and to know. And, you know, I still to this day have people, very well-meaning people, try and tell me that I'm doing too much, or I'm giving too much, or there can't possibly be, a way to make this into a high conversion model, and that I can't possibly have the sales results that I have, but I do. And I think that speaks volumes for just how unique our strategy can be and how many assumptions people make about other people's businesses, their models, their intentions, and what motivates someone to invest versus continue consuming your content for free. And so notice where maybe as an extrovert, you're in relationship with some people who aren't the right fit because you need those relationships as an extrovert, or you're opening yourself up in some places to a lot more overgiving or generosity, or, those courses or programs, you're staying in them too long because you just crave that human-to-human connection. But look for ways that you can access that human-to-human connection in a far more positive and fulfilling and right fit for you. So, for example, when I stepped out of a peer-led mastermind that I realized was actually just me being a surrogate business coach for 6 people who were getting my attention and energy for free and free coaching, and I made the decision to step away from it, which, was really hard because I felt like I got a lot of connection from that. I felt like it was very good for my ego because I was the most expert, most successful person in that mastermind. When I stepped out of that, it was less than 3-4 weeks later that I finally got to meet Leonie Dawson in person on the Sunshine Coast. And then we became fast friends. And then she invited me into her peer-led mastermind group that was like a messenger thread. And then I was invited into another peer-led mastermind from someone who I really admired who had spoken at my conference. And then I was invited to go to a retreat with another group of people. And I thought, like, they didn't even know I existed, and it was absolutely spectacular. And all I had to do was just pay expenses. And for me, it's one of those things like a door closes, a window opens. I actually don't know that I was energetically available to those invitations when I was still part of that previous mastermind because I was prioritizing my ego and having friends and connections for the sake of having them over really discerning what is it that I want to be part of and what is the space that I want to step into. And I remember a few days after letting that mastermind know that I was leaving, and, I was really grateful for our time together, but it was time for me to step into something different. A few days later, I was doing some journaling and I literally said, I want to be the minnow in the room, not the shark, right? And I was thinking of like more Shark Tank, like I didn't go around like eating up my peers, but I want to be the minnow, not the shark. And like so quickly, I was invited into 2 spaces where I literally felt like the minnow, and it was really uncomfortable. And my ego did some real tripping out over that. But it was so valuable to my growth, and it was so valuable to be able to just be conscious and make mindful choices about the spaces I really wanted to be in. Which brings me to the end of my 4 tips for extroverts, and particularly when it comes to online marketing for extroverts. Now, the last thing I will say is that as an extrovert, chances are connection and understanding other people deeply, being able to engage with people very consistently, that is a superpower. And as per the early part of this podcast, when I was talking about how so many of the online business owners that I know are introverts, it's actually probably a little bit of a differentiator as well. And so look for ways that you can tap into that superpower for your business. Connection is what supercharges conversion. And so connection being a superpower of yours, rather than dismissing that as, oh, that's just like manual handling, that's trading time for money, that's a very basic model of business. That's not the advanced automated model, right? Automated funnels are so much better, right? Rather than seeing that as an issue or a problem or a rudimentary way of doing things, remind yourself as consistently as possible that this can be your edge. This can be your competitive advantage when you really tap into it. If you are looking to find some new people to connect with, you're looking to get your extrovert battery recharged, you're looking to grow and expand your network with people who want to see you succeed, with people who might be your ideal clients, facilitated networking is a huge part of what I offer in the Heart-Centered Business Conference, both in person and the virtual conference. Virtual conference is in February each year. In-person conference is in September each year in Noosa in Southeast Queensland. And I'll have the links to both of those in the show notes of today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/504. Now, if you're listening to this podcast episode when it's released, virtual conference is coming up very soon. 2026 virtual conference has the theme of lead generation. So if that is something in particular you want to improve and start to really scale up, then it's going to be even more valuable for you. But also, virtual conference is valuable just in your ability to connect with other people by being in the room. We have speed networking. We have breakout rooms where you can chat in between sessions. We have spotlight opportunities to get your business in the spotlight. We have a Facebook community where you can communicate with and meet all the other attendees even before and after virtual conference. And then we've got some spectacular speakers, myself included, and we've got that beautiful theme, that powerful strategic theme of lead generation for 2026 as well. If you can't make it in 2026 and you're thinking about joining us in 2027, the theme for 2027 is messaging. So another spectacular theme. And I've already got 2 brilliant speakers lined up for 2027 because we're getting in that home stretch now of preparing to start opening the doors for next year's virtual conference. So make sure you come and check all of that out. I'll have the links to both in-person conference and virtual conference with the show notes of today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/504. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. And until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. Bye for now.